This is Wednesday, 9th of December 2020. This is part A of the Khoodeelaar campaign, defending the community in the East End of London and from the East End of London. And this is part A of the Khoodeelaar television, world exclusive diagnosis of Fleet Street. Now, Fleet Street is, of course, the name of the street where most of the English-centric, London-centric newspapers had been published for a very long time. So, although they have moved their offices from Fleet Street itself in central London, the collective name referring to the London-based newspapers typified by the Times remains Fleet Street, associated with that street and that location. And a random search of the search engines for Fleet Street would reveal that and some details. And there is a confession that is indirectly kind of published in the Financial Times that Johnson has actually been on the retreat. This would not be the kind of impression given by the Daily Mail or the Daily Express or the Murdoch scum, or even by the Daily Mirror or the Guardian, all of which have been carrying in a servile way the message that is based on lies and denials. And the message is that it is the European Union negotiators, and in the last 48 hours, it has been the French who have been causing the problem for Britain. And as the kind of date approaches for the official kind of so-called departure of the UK from the EU, the intensity of the propaganda of lies to shore up Boris Johnson-fronted cabal gets worse, gets deeper, and gets even more brazen and irresponsible. Irresponsibility and unreliability is a kind of problem admitted by the Times yesterday, on Tuesday, the 8th of December 2020, where Rachel Sylvester's piece is headlined, "Who will want to do a deal with us after this?" And what she means by after this is this: there was always going to be an element of performance in the final stages of the Brexit talks. Performance meaning stage-managed kind of shows, displays, the kind of exhibition rather than substance. This is the political equivalent of professional wrestling, with both sides flexing their muscles to prove to different audiences how tough they are. It is to some extent a show fight, like Big Daddy and giant haystacks stepping into the ring for a carefully choreographed series of body slams and chop kicks in which The sense of conflict is deliberately exaggerated for effect. Boris Johnson's high stakes, last minute dash to Brussels is all part of the production. But in wrestling, the outline of the fight is agreed in advance by both opponents. On Brexit, there has been no coordination between the two sides. So the danger is greater that someone will get hurt. It's definitely not all show, says one close observer. Whether or not there is a free trade deal, Britain has already been harmed by this bruising process. This is the Times, owned by Rupert Murdoch, who owns the Brexiteering Sun. We are walking away from certainty, status, and allies straight into the unknown, says one Tory peer. And at the worst possible time, the end of the transition period on December 31st should have ushered in a glorious new era in international relations. But if global Britain has been auditioning for a leading role on the world stage, the performance has not gone down well. At a time when the country needs to build new alliances, the damage done to Britain's reputation since 2016 is enormous. 2016, Rachel Sylvester refers to is the year when the dreadful Brexit was staged. Lord Ricketts, former permanent secretary of the Foreign Office, keeps in touch with many ambassadors from around the world. Most of them are, he says, baffled by the British government's chaotic and inconsistent approach since the EU referendum. They say, "What's going on in your country? You seem to have lost your way. What has happened to the Britain we knew?" He told me, that is Rachel Sylvester was told by the man in the House of Peers now called Ricketts. "We always had a reputation," says Ricketts to Rachel Sylvester, as a country that was pragmatic, hard-headed, and full of common sense. We were seen as good negotiators who knew what we wanted. That's been badly damaged, if not destroyed, by what looks from abroad like a long period of indecision and trying to pursue completely incompatible objectives. This was supposed to be the easiest trade deal in history that would deliver the exact same benefits as membership of the EU. But the vote leave mythology is about to hit reality, and the trade-offs are going to have to be confronted. Far from being the last big negotiation that Britain is going to have to do, this is just the first of many. And other nations with which we want to trade deals will have been watching and learning from our mistakes over the past 4 years. Mr. Johnson may think he looks strong when he plays hardball with the EU, but to many around the world, he appears weak. A prime minister who is being pushed around by its backbenchers rather than leading from the front. According to Lord Ricketts, it's been pretty clear to observers around this abroad that this has been largely a psychodrama about the Conservative Party and its internal obsession with the EU. There is a feeling that the government is in hock to a smallish group who are the hardest end of that spectrum and are prepared to ride roughshod over the usual parliamentary conventions. And she goes on and on, and she goes on up to the last paragraph where she says, "This year has revealed amazing things about this country. from the scientists who created a COVID-19 vaccine to the NHS that treated the sick and the businesses that adapted to lockdown rules, there has been a reinvigorated community spirit. But that has not been reflected in the man who represents the nation abroad. Boris Johnson has not established a reputation as a serious heavyweight player, says Lord Ricketts. Britain has been so absent from global diplomacy and obsessed with its own politics. People voted to take back control, but it is still not clear what they or the Prime Minister meant by that. Now, obviously, Rachel Sylvester is grudgingly accepting some of the evidence, but she is not telling the truth anywhere near efficiently or truthfully as the evidence warrants and demands. Now, that was Tuesday's the Times. So she must have written it on Monday, the 7th. And today, the Financial Times is saying Johnson is heading to Brussels for talks after scrapping law-breaking clauses. And this is George Parker in London and Jim Bransden and Sam Fleming in Brussels. Says Boris Johnson will head to Brussels for crucial Brexit talks today in the hope that the two sides can use positive momentum generated by a deal on Northern Ireland to salvage trade negotiations. Now, this is not the first time that they have said this about Northern Ireland, and it is not going to be the last time they will say it, because Northern Ireland symbolizes the problem of imperialist mindset that still dominates the mentality and attitude and the outlook of those who are in control or those in posts in the UK in power. And there is a piece by Martin Wolf on economics. The free market doctrine that has guided us for 50 years now needs re-evaluation. That's Martin Wolf. Now, we knew that. We have been saying it throughout the whole 50 years, that Friedman was not only wrong, but he was also lying. He was philosophically wrong, ideologically wrong, and he was dishonest. And he was corrupt. And he was serving the agenda of the big business corporates and the military-industrial complex and all the things that are wrong. And they're talking about EU, Financial Times big read about the EU's business. European regulators are set to unveil bills to curb the power of Google, Apple, Amazon, and Facebook. Do they have any chance of succeeding in limiting the range and the reach of the big tech platform companies? That is Xavier Espinoza. And Xavier Espinoza sounds like a Spanish or a Portuguese name. And the headline is Brussels takes on the digital gatekeepers. Now that is not, that's in the Financial Times, but that is not going to be truthful. It's going to be kind of contradictory piece capitulating to the agenda of the big business, despite the headline. And they're kind of publishing a piece about Polish government imposing curbs on the freedom of the press. And there is a piece here, the picture of Johnson, pictured in Downing Street. And it says that Johnson's statecraft faces tough test over dinner with von der Leyen. Now, this is not, the Financial Times is not telling the truth. Financial Times has the pretense of telling the truth about money and business and the economy, but it is not telling the truth by a long shot. And most certainly, this headline about the test of Boris Johnson's statecraft is itself misleading and untruthful, because Boris Johnson in his record has no statecraft at all. That is the whole point. He has had no statecraft. It's all pretense and lies. And there is a Daily Star joke piece which says that aliens secret pact with Donald Trump. And it says aliens have made surprise contract with Donald Trump, of all people, but swore the orange one to secrecy to avoid hysteria, totally sane space boss claims. And there is a bubble there. I am the smartest in the universe, and I won the intergalactic election bigly. So what is it saying on page 9, which is where the text is supposed to be? ETs told President, don't go public yet. Donald Trump has been holding secret talks with aliens. A former space boss has claimed the US president was close to going public about his extraterrestrial dealings, but he was talked out of it by alien chiefs keen to keep it under wraps. Professor Haque says the ETs have been dealing with the US government for years. The former head of Israel's space security program said there is even an underground base on Mars where a galactic federation of leaders meets up. Retired Professor Ishad, 87, said, the aliens have asked not to announce that they are here because humanity is not ready yet. Trump was on the verge of revealing, but the aliens in the Galactic Federation are saying, wait, let people calm down first. They don't want to start mass hysteria. They want to first make us sane and understanding. Mr. Ishad, who was in charge of Israel's space security program from 1981 to 2010, added, they have been waiting for humanity to evolve and reach a stage where we will generally understand what space and spaceships are. If I had come up with what I'm saying today 5 years ago, I would have been hospitalized. Today, they're already talking differently. I have nothing to lose. I have received my degrees and awards. I am respected in universities abroad, where the trend is also changing. Last week, scientists revealed life on Mars might have once existed miles beneath the planet's rocky, hostile surface. So the page ends incompletely, and they continue on the theme in their editorial. And they're saying in the editorial headline, based out, former Israeli space chief Professor Haim Ashed claims there is a base on Mars where alien and US representatives meet, and Donald Trump was close to making it public. Our Martian friends wanted Donald Trump to make Mars great again. Well, that's not really factual, is it? And there is a two-page spread on the overdoing of the name Shakespeare about the vaccine promotion. And really, that is not something that even we can diagnose because it is beyond jokes. Because the juxtaposition of the overhyped propaganda for Boris Johnson's cabal about dealing with COVID and the vaccine and dealing with the EU, this is all fiction created in order to give an urgency and an emergency and the kind of ability of statecraft by Johnson, which is completely, it could be as far away from reality as Mars still is, despite the Daily Star revealing aliens have been in contact with the Americans. And the Daily Mirror is completely on board in propaganda for the vaccine. And the two-page spread of propaganda for Kate Middleton and Wills, with Brenda being shown as a tiny figure and Kate Middleton as the main figure. So they appointed Kate Middleton queen already. What a contrast with the contempt that they show to Harry and his wife Meghan. And they're saying that the BBC's designer dog show may fuel the illegal puppy trade. And they've got a nearly two-page spread on Diane Warwick, who is reportedly aged 80. And there's more speculation about the child Madeleine McCann. It is speculative piece about the German prosecutors speculating by saying, as reported by the Mirror, that if you knew what we do, then you would agree or you would say that he killed the child. That's not evidence. That is complete kind of supposition and hypothesis and fantasy. They have not come up with any evidence about any of the named other persons who have been credibly accused of having murdered or abducted or done similar things to the child. The only persistent kind of pointing of the finger has been at the parents of the child. It may one day become clear as to why the British authorities have spent millions of pounds in fueling and supporting propaganda that points to hundreds of other people, while the same British prosecution authorities have practically abolished crimes, including murders and severe kind of crimes in the UK involving other people, and severe losses and damages that they have been refusing to investigate on the grounds that they haven't got the resources. And there is this piece on the I newspaper. There is a piece, Deputy Political Editor. The headline is UK drops plan to break international law. And this is the one that follows the same line that the Rachel Sylvester piece on Tuesday kind of pursued incompletely. And there is this Katie Bowles. She is bringing good news for Johnson and saying that he's safe from Brexit rebellion. Now, this is contradictory. And this is another propaganda piece. And Katie Bowles, who has been successfully pursuing a double kind of edged persona and professional career in Fleet Street as an expert. She's very much involved with the promotion of the right wing as the Spectator, and also gets platforms in Fleet Street and also on the BBC and on Sky News. And the Daily Mail is shamelessly using the phrase V-Day about the vaccine. It doesn't actually get any worse. It is not V-Day, because the propaganda for the vaccine is based on propaganda. It's not based on evidence. And all the claims that they have been making about British success and British vaccine being successful and successful almost 100% is based on propaganda. It's not based on any experience, because people have not had the vaccine at all. So it cannot be said that people who have received or been given vaccine have had no adverse reactions, and that the vaccine has done the work that it is claimed to do. And then there's two-page spread, pages 2 and 3, promoting Kate Hamilton as the Queen, and Wills being shown as the sidekick. And on pages 6 and 7, they are continuing the lunatic promotion of the vaccine. And they are condemning a coronavirus advisor as the downbeat advisor on his warning that vaccine may not stop virus spread. That is it. That's the explanation. They're admitting it. But they're admitting it in a brazenly in denial way, that they're admitting it, and they're kind of contradicting. And they're speculating if London is about to go into tier 3 of the lockdown. And there is a spread on pages 14 and 15 showing two pictures of the picture of the two persons, Johnson and the EU chief, Ursula von der Leyen, smiling. as a dinner date. What a stupid thing to say, dinner date. I mean, it's not. On the one hand, they have been trading on Brexit as the nightmare. I mean, EU membership is the nightmare. And then they say it's the dinner date. How can they reconcile these? And this is another day of the Daily Mail proving that it is the paper for the gullibles. And the Brexit has been the agenda for the gullibles. And all the Fleet Street papers role is geared to the people being the gullible and prone to being brainwashed. And the evidence so far is that the people are quite happy to be gullibles and brainwashed. And they've got a cartoon which says COVID-19 vaccinations. And on the wall it says, please give your name to the nurse. Quote, William Shakespeare, really? I think it's going to be one of those days. Now that is the perfect cartoon. And there is a racist outrage on the Daily Mail against Birmingham Council naming some of its streets to reflect diversity. And of course, they're in cahoots with the Conservative MPs on the Midlands. And this is not the face that looks chilling. It really looks normal. It doesn't look chilling, although they're calling it chilling. And Alison Boshoff has continued this item about Bob Dylan's chaotic love life behind his 225 million sellout of his musical archives. And what the Fleet Street Papers and Daily Mail actually concentrate on is denial of reality. Denial of reality, despite the fact that they are against anti-racism, they're quick to hit Birmingham when it shows a tokenistic tendency to be inclusive in the street names. These papers are full of fantasy about everything. Even the so-called fact-based kind of reporting about Brexit and about the virus. And they're completely, absolutely contemptuous of the people. And the reason why they're contemptuous of the people, that the brainwash, is because these people are gullibles. And because they're gullibles, these people don't even notice that they are being brainwashed and kept in the state of being perpetually brainwashed every day. And Anne Widdecombe is a complete, absolute racist and a denier, is attacking the people who point out the lies of the conservatives. And she attacks them, the people who use the social media to report and post about the lying cons. And there is a surprisingly morally acceptable kind of item, morally acceptable in the sense that this is how they should be doing the references to the events. They're saying that a tribunal has excused man's sexual offending, and Angar, as senior Brexit lawyer, is not disbarred over upskirting photos. Campaigners have blasted a decision to allow a former senior government lawyer to stay in the profession after he was convicted of upskirting. Barrister Darren Timson Hunt was caught using his phone to film up a female passenger's skirt on stairs on the London Underground. The 55-year-old was head of a Brexit legal team at the Department for International Trade at the time. He was one of the first people to be convicted of upskirting when he admitted the offense at Westminster Magistrates Court last year. And he was not jailed, he was given community service. Now, anyone watching this program, this campaigning program, would be familiar with the expression licensed law trader. We don't call them barristers, we don't call them solicitors. We call them collectively licensed law traders. Because without that kind of descriptive expression describing them, the words barrister and solicitor really do not convey anything like the corruption, the criminality that these license holders are able to perpetrate and perpetuate, because there is no accountability. Like this court, the judiciary has let this criminal off. The question, quite apart from the fact that he has been already in the news. There is no way that a person who is not a licensed law trader or not a part of the corruptocracy, that is the judicial bureaucracy, a legal bureaucracy in this country, if somebody who did not belong to that corruptocracy and bureaucracy and had been found to have done this crime, whether they would be treated the same way at all. And the answer is that they wouldn't be. And there is this continuation of the libel action that has been brought by Rebecca Vardy against Colin Rooney. Now, this libel action, again, is only going ahead because of the money that the claimant has. Ordinary people and people who are not part of the kind of wealthocracy are denied access to the libel court. And we shall be talking more in terms by way of updates on that in due course. And that's not the Colin Rooney and Rebecca Vardy libel case also belies the suggested confidence that David Neuberger expressed in the British kind of judiciary and the so-called access to justice reform fronted by Wolf, a former judge Wolf, is exposed as a complete sham, as having been a complete sham. There is no access to justice for ordinary people. The judiciary is a scam. It's an open, brazen scam, and it is not held to account whatsoever. And the scam has got a rare kind of editorial which appears to criticize government spin doctors about the actual numbers of people dying of the virus. And the rest of the scum is full of the usual rubbish. And the Times says that Johnson is doing uphill battle as he meets with the EU president. And it predicts that there will be agreement on Northern Ireland, but further talks may not be possible. And it's celebrating that UK will get 1 million further vaccines next week. And on page 2, it says that Hong Kong citizens are too scared to voice their fears about the Chinese. And Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook is threatening anti-tech Britain. it says. The dean of an Oxford college is facing disciplinary proceedings over allegations of sexual assault, even though the police concluded that there was not enough evidence to prosecute him. Now, this is the latest kind of published admission that the police have banned or abolished most crimes, and this is the one that they've been reportedly kind of abolishing, or they have abolished these sexual assaults as crimes. And although the Sun is criticizing the government and claiming that the virus casualties numbers coming down, this one says on page 10 of the coronavirus news, on page 10 of the Times, nation's worst virus rate sends London veering towards tier 3. So it is saying that London is actually facing rises in the rate of infections. And they're saying that Robert Maxwell's daughter Ghislaine has lost weight and her hair is falling out in jail. And they're saying that number 10 has got a nightmare scenario squad set up in number 10 Downing Street. This is all absolutely propaganda. And there is a scarce kind of connection with the truth, which says that a Brexiteer billionaire is going to build new Land Rover in France, which is giving the game away again. That Brexit is a pack of lies. And it says that English teenagers slide down the global rankings for science, and it has got the list. 2019 list is topped by Singapore, then Taiwan, Japan, South Korea, Russia, Finland, Lithuania, Hungary, Australia, and Ireland. No sign of the UK in there or England in there. But in 2015, England was 8th position out of 10, led by Singapore, Japan, Taiwan, South Korea, Slovenia, Hong Kong, Russia, England, Kazakhstan, and Ireland. And Sturgeon's husband's testimony may apparently exposed Sturgeon to allegation that she misled members of the Scottish Parliament over the sexual allegations against Alex Salmon. And Daniel Finkelstein says in these times, Brexiteers need to make their minds up. And they're saying that there is a piece in the Times on page 28 by Roger Boyce. He says that the remote control murder of an Iranian general shows the need for a high-tech war rulebook. He's saying that the Israelis remotely assassinated this Iranian scientist. And they're also using this phrase, which is completely stupid, V-Day. Britain is the first Western country to embark on a mass vaccination program and should be grateful to all those who have made it possible. And it says that Facebook is running out of friends and showing its arrogance. And it says that Everest reaches new heights with an extra 86 centimeters to climb. Now that is completely irresponsible. The headline should not be talking about the inches to climb. It should never allow this kind of lying attacks on the environment. And there should not be any adventure at the expense of the Everest. And the Boris graph is leading with the picture of Brenda in the middle and Kate Middleton and Wills on one side and Charles and Camilla on the other side. And the main headline is masks for a year despite vaccine. And Alison Pearson, who is one of the most poisonous blonde-haired kind of occupant of a media platform, is more racist than some of the notorious other racists on the media. And she's condemning the BBC because of Dawn French's kind of reference to fighting racism and prejudice. And she's saying it's time to stop the EU's petty posturing and just leave. Now that shows the complete lack of brains on the part of this Alison Pearson. If that were the case, then of course Boris Johnson would have would have left, and the Brexiteers would have left. The idea of the EU as children, as infants, moaning about things, gives the game away about the Brexiteers being the children and infants and idiots. Because when the European Economic Community was formed after the Second Western War, it was formed because of economic necessities, as well as out of the need to stop immediate warmongering. It wasn't a kind of joke. The economic community, of course, has had defects, serious defects, but those defects are not due to the fact that it's a bloc, it's an economic bloc. It is due to the fact that democracy has not been present in the countries. And when they decided to change it and make it more like a union, the European Union, that too was prompted by the need for economic survival of the Western economies. Not that alone, but that was the bigger kind of push and factor. And when the United Kingdom, one of the most corrupt empires and imperialist kind of robbers of other people's rights, acceded and accepted the various statements of human rights, upholding human rights, due process, access to kind of equality and fair trial and all the other things contained in the founding declarations of the United Nations Organization, and then further kind of updated by the Treaty of Rome of 1950. It did that reluctantly by working out the balance of profit and loss, that it would be better off even accepting those treaty conditions, because the return for Britain as a whole would far outweigh any changes that the ruling forces in Britain would have to make to their dominant, unfair, unjust regime of illegal constitution. Illegal constitution in the sense that although it is not, we're not talking about the written and unwritten forms, we're talking about the collection of laws that can be treated as collectively as the Constitution, represented illegality against most citizens and members of the public in Britain by the British state. That remains the case even today. 73, 74, 75 years since the original drafts were kind of conceived for the founding of the United Nations Organization. And in all of this commentary, we are not talking about the failures of the Labour Party, which have been responsible for the inadequacies and the corruption and the criminality to prevail. And the main players have been the Conservatives. And Rachel Sylvester's piece in the Times on Tuesday, the 8th of December 2020, based on the member of the House of Peers, Ricketts, saying that the behavior of the Johnson-fronted cabal and the Brexiteers, the behavior is actually reflective of the various rows and infighting among the Conservatives. Well, that is one conventionally retailed kind of statement or explanation, but that's not the whole truth. The whole truth is that as David Dimbo has told Channel 4 News this week, the country has been driven, split over the Brexit thing and what it entails. While the evidence does not support the simplistic kind of explanation given by David Dimbo as broadcast on Channel 4 this week, it contains representative evidence of the truth. And the truth is that the Labour Party has existed, but it has not led this country in any way, shape, or form. Led in the sense of being democratic, accountable, fair, transparent, and just, and anti-racist. It may have led in the capitulation to the American kind of policy of warmongering among the Muslim countries in the years that Khoodeelaar was in post as Prime Minister. That was not leading, that was misleading the country. And the likes of Jeremy Corbyn, who were already in post as members of parliament, while Khoodeelaar was misleading the country, they failed to make the alternative commentary and narrative available. They did that they failed 20 years ago, and they're still failing 20 years later. And in between, they've been failing to represent the truth and the cause for justice and democracy and fairness and equality for the majority of the people that the ignorant Jeremy Corbyn has learned to refer to as the many. Now, those many, of course, predominantly are the gullibles, and the majority of the people are white indigenous people. But when it comes to the Tories opposing the Birmingham Council's kind of attempt to rename the streets or some of the streets in Birmingham to reflect the need for diversity ahead of the Commonwealth Games, that is the reason why they're doing this, that actually highlights the bankruptcy of the Jeremy Corbyn linked so-called left in the Labour Party. So there is no left that is moral, ethical, in a way that embraces the universal values, let alone leads in implementing universal values in its behavior. Nothing has come out of the left in the last 70 years that has recognized the practical need to admit that imperialism was a serious economic and social catastrophe caused to billions of people in the world. And that catastrophe has not been even acknowledged by the Labour Party left. In any policy in any steps with any traction. So if the Brexit thing is the reflection, or the Brexiteering is the reflection of the various tensions and rows within the Conservative Party, so-called, as Ricketts had told Rachel Sylvester of the Times, then that has been a serious piece of political kind of duty, emergency, that should have been actually addressed by the Labour Party intervening in that internal, so-called internal rows. The Labour Party should never have accepted Brexit or whatever the Conservatives were allegedly doing internally as the internal business of the Conservative Party. The Labour Party should have taken the lead in analyzing those fights and infights and pointing to the fact that those fights actually showed the Conservatives were unfit for office. But they haven't done that. The Labour Party hasn't done that. Neither the left, nor the left of centre, nor the left of right of centre in the Labour Party has done that. As the right of centre, the middle centre, the soft left of the Labour Party, there, I mean, the likes of Khoodeelaar are Conservatives in Labour guise. And Starmer is playing a very much a blaring role currently in capitulating to the Conservatives' various scams and schemes. So if the main parties and the main kind of media are this bad, then why do people whose human rights are not recognized by either the parties or the media generally and are referred to falsely and wrongly and offensively and racistly as migrants, where do the migrants, so-called, get human rights in Britain, which is what they call home? There is no place in Britain, either in parliamentary terms or in terms of the local kind of setup of the local councils, and in between the regional or other institutions that are intermediate, for example, the so-called regulators, the ombudsman, and the kind of big business corporations, so on. There is no place where the rights of the migrants are recognized. And when there is a notional acknowledgement and recognition of the rights of the migrants and the needs of the migrants, which is, in terms of numbers, I shall come to that in a short while. When there is a notional acceptance of the duties owed to the communities in their localities by local councils, that notional acknowledgement is totally distorted and denied and undone by the actual behavior of the personnel, both the holders of the elected posts, including the elected mayor posts, and also by the elected councillors, and most certainly by the employed full-time personnel in employed positions in those councils and in the case of the Mayor of London, in the Mayor of London's bureaucracy. And the bureaucracy includes, of course, the various agencies, executive agencies of the Mayor of London's kind of operation, the Greater London Assembly, and the UK central government departments and their executive agencies. So, for example, if there are 20, let's say, main government departments, altogether they have got, on average, 20 each. So there are hundreds of agencies, government executive agencies, direct and indirect, that operate various policies and making decisions every single day, affecting millions of people, millions of migrants, and millions of the gullibles, millions of the ordinary people in this country. So if we make a list, we can see that at every stage, the prejudice is built into the behavior and the outlook of the personnel making the decisions affecting the migrants, let's say. People from Africa and Asia, let's say, mainly, but not exclusively. And those outlook and attitudes are in denial of the rights that should be available, should be delivered to the people of African and Asian origin. Most people are not migrants. Most people who are of African and Asian origins in this country are not migrants. Their parents may have been, some of their grandparents may have been, but most of the current population of people of African and Asian backgrounds are not born abroad. But even if they are born abroad, whoever is born abroad, people from Africa and Asia, that is to say, people from the so-called British Commonwealth, which is the empire, which is a different name for the empire, are given citizenship equivalent rights, if you like, in elections and so on. So people without any restrictions, that is to say, people who are of African and Asian kind of countries, nationalities, and if those countries are members of the so-called Commonwealth, British Commonwealth, then they're able to take part in elections, both as candidates and as electors. That is the case. And yet, when the people, African and Asian people, seek services, the services are denied. And they're not denied just by indigenous white people or white people from European countries who are working in the public sector or in the service provider organizations. There is a built-in prejudice and hostility and obstruction that is very serious. It's not just a minor complaint. It violates fundamental human rights. And it violates fundamental human rights in a way that is never acknowledged in the commentary and the discussions. Even when a very large disproportionate number of people were allowed to be treated with deadly neglect during the first virus infection of earlier this year. There is no acknowledgement in the reporting, in the coverage, in the references to those deadly incidents being caused by racism, caused by built-in obstruction and prejudice. So let's say health staff or care home staff. Now these people are, in the current kind of atmosphere of the lockdown and the social distancing and the separation and the ban on people under treatment, seeing any other person, including members of the family. If these people who are ill, that seriously ill, are being prevented from seeing their relations, then they're only being in contact with the person or persons supposedly administering the care and the health service to them. What happens one-to-one? If the person delivering the care or the health service decides to behave like Harold Shipman and either withdraw the treatment or withdraw the medicine or medication, or to inflict deadly administration of a medication, who can see that? And what kind of investigation will ever get to the truth of all these cases? And that is not something that should be left to investigation after the event. That should be dealt with by looking at that scenario, and that is the majority scenario, and making sure that this doesn't happen, that this person who is left to administer the care or the service is reminded as they are in contact with the patient that they must not abuse their position. They must not misbehave, misadminister, and misserve these persons. This is what is at stake, and this has not been discussed. And this will be the only way to prevent these deadly activities. As we have said about the absence of the truth coming out of inquiries in this country generally, illustrated by the fact that there have been 30 plus years and since the Hillsborough massacre. We can say in context what has happened with the care home deaths, etc., and in the other deaths of the disproportionate numbers of African and Asian people in the health service due to the virus. And we can then contextually, contemporaneously, can refer to the Grenfell Tower massacres. They can be having all kinds of inquiries, but the inquiries will not reveal the truth, because the setup of the inquiries, the terms of reference of the inquiries are false and are controlled by the very sources, the very kind of decision-making bureaucracies about whose critical role the inquiries have been set up. And they will never have terms of reference that will reveal the truth about their behavior or prevent their future similar behavior. Extrapolate this to cover the abuse of children, sexual abuse of children over the decades by the church, the clergy. Quite apart from the comparatively recent kind of revelations about the mainly Pakistani man kind of targeting mainly white girls for sexual exploitation, rape, and grooming, the churches in this country have been perpetrating sexual abuse of children for decades, for hundreds of years. This has been known, and inquiries have been held, and these abuses have kept taking place, kept on being perpetrated. So one set of inquiries are ongoing about the previous periods concerned, while the other sets of perpetration and abuses continue. And the inquiries into those new ones or currently ongoing ones will not take place until decades later. And in all of these, the Labour Party has been completely absent. The Labour Party has not led on any of these. So the Labour Party has not led on any of this, and yet there is a package of images that the conservative, the right wing, the more brazenly racist ones have at the ready to inflict on or attach to the image of the Labour Party. Now, this world exclusive diagnosis of Fleet Street is exclusive to the extent that nothing like this has ever come out of the so-called left in this country. It most certainly hasn't come from the right, but it hasn't come from the left either. And it takes us back to the beginning of the 1980s when I started my analysis in this form, and I called it left out of the media. In short, I called it LOOM, L-O-O-M, left out of the media. And the left has been out of the media despite the boasts made by some of the self-seeking left revolutionary bogus kind of persons and interests. If anyone read at least, let's say, a shortened version of what the Socialist Workers' Party chief theoretician stands for, you can find that theoretician is empty and is racist and is ignorant. I mean, I'm saying that based on the evidence of my study of the Socialist Workers' Party and my study of the behavior of several Socialist Workers' Party operatives. And they have been absolutely corrupt or ignorant or both, and they have been racist. So despite the fact that they say that the cons and the Tories are the bad ones, which is correct, they haven't done anything to show that they are not as bad or as corrupt or as racist as the Conservatives. And this is not just applicable to the Socialist Workers' Party. It also applies to the other left outlets. They're racist, they're ignorant, and when it comes to the likes of me, they are very anti-Muslim. They think that my name, the Muslim name, admittedly, represents my political ideology in the sense they understand Muslims' political ideology to be. Mine is not. Mine is above and beyond comparison with any of the existing platforms by any group of people anywhere on this planet. Hence, these values that I highlight in my kind of advocacy and my analysis: universality, universal ethics, universal morality, universal accountability, universal transparency, and a universal fairness and universal justice. These are not to be found anywhere in any other platform. But because they are themselves genetically and politically hostile to Muslims, any name like my name triggers anti-Muslim hatred and intolerance and denial in them. And that is before they actually come into contact with me and find that what I have to offer is even tougher, far higher standard than they can ever face up to and face, let alone deal with. So their hostility is very much based on the evidence of the rigor that I have created and I represent. And this rigor has been present for decades, as has been the opposition and hostility and corrupt interference by these so-called left-wing revolutionaries in my work. They have constantly sabotaged and tried to sabotage and undermine and hinder the movement's work. And the work is written, spoken, and otherwise recorded, let's say, by film, by audio, and by video, by still photography as well. And all the evidence shows that the crisis in Britain is not just the crisis that the so-called left prefers to call it, crisis of capitalism. That is rubbish. It's a holistic crisis of British society, where the people so-called anti-imperialists are part of imperialism, part and parcel of imperialism. The so-called stop the war kind of sloganeers have been part of the war propaganda for wars and warfares. The so-called friends of Palestine are with the narrative of the violators of Palestine. So, for example, when we campaign in East London or from East London, which we are doing continuously against the corrupt local council, in this case, the local council, the expression local council includes local councils, Tower Hamlets, Newham, Hackney, and other local councils across East London, and includes, of course, the Lewisham Council, because Lewisham and Newham and Tower Hamlets and Hackney are the 4 London borough councils that are lumbered with elected mayor. And we shall come to Croydon, where the disaster is going to be imposed by a combination of stupidity by the Labour Party and the Labour Council, as well as by the so-called Lib Dems and the so-called campaign called Inside Croydon. Inside Croydon and the Lib Dems are hectically engaged in lobbying for the imposition of a mayor on the Croydon Council. Now, Croydon Council is it's not the only one, but one of the most corrupt local councils. And the idiots who are now campaigning for an elected mayor don't understand that their claim that the elected mayor would end the corruption of and by and in and through the corrupt Croydon Council would only increase the corruption, increase the theft of public resources, and the denial of services to the community. So that is the kind of evidence that we have based on the behavior of Tower Hamlets Council, the behavior of Newham Council, the behavior of Hackney Council and Lewisham Council. And yet, in none of these councils and about none of these corrupt councils' behavior and failures to serve the local communities, local electors, has there been any appearance of any action by any faction of the left, including the Socialist Workers' Party. Which is why I have used the phrase that other people had used many years ago about the SWP, socialist, and the W is not spelled in the way that workers. It's pronounced in an obscene kind of word way. And that is given to them because of their record of behaving in that obscene way. Anyone who knows of demonstrations, say, allegedly for the rights of asylum seekers, allegedly for the rights of the people, the migrants being kept in detention centers, immigration detention centers, would know that the placards shown at most of those gatherings are predominantly factory-produced placards by the Socialist Workers' Party. And the people who are carrying the Socialist Workers' Party, main carriers of the banners, are nowhere known in the local communities. Like a mechanical operation, these SWP activists surface at the point of the gathering, but they are not part of the local communities in the boroughs. Explain that, study that, investigate that. And this is not something that has happened only in the last 1 year or 2 years or even 3 years. This has been going on for decades. Where do they come from? And why don't they have any contacts as ordinary members of the community, as neighbors in any of the boroughs, in any of the streets. That is a factor, but that is not the only factor. But this is related to the fact that in the years, the 6 years of Lutfur Rahman's kind of stay as the elected mayor in Tower Hamlets, 6 calendar years, and during which he committed many abuses, illegalities, and corrupt activities, the socialist workers never, ever even recognized any of that. Nor have they, in fact, recognized any of the wrongs that Robin Wales did over 16 years that he was incumbent as the elected mayor at the expense of the people and the borough and the electorate of Newham from 2002 to 2018. Nor has the SWP been seen or heard about Newham since Roxana Fiaz succeeded Robin Wales in May 2018. Same applies to Lewisham, where one of the most corrupt and abusive incumbents in the post of elected mayor, Steve Bullock, openly condemned campaigners in the most derogatory words and phrases. Campaigners that otherwise would be doing the same things as the SWP claims to be campaigning for. Yet the SWP has not taken any part in opposing Steve Bullock while he was in post. So, for example, when the socialist workers produced some surfacing at the gatherings about the bedroom tax, they never talked about the bedroom tax decision makers. And the same thing applies to the socialist workers not talking about the homelessness crisis created by local borough councils decision makers making decisions to make people homeless. There is no evidence. So what are these socialist workers campaigning for and for whom? In September 1993, the socialist workers colluded with a number of criminals operating in Tower Hamlets who found themselves left out of the media coverage that I had created against the racist attack on the then teenager in the commercial road. When they found that I was being reported by the BBC television news channel or News 24, whatever, and the BBC radio, the SWP moved to action and immediately sabotaged the direction for accountability that I was kind of moving in. So if you multiply the evidence of their behavior by the numbers of times that they directly or indirectly undermine the work that universally defined would constitute the best campaigning work that has been going on, and in my case has been going on for a very long time, you can find the most authentic, authoritative list of items of evidence of what these socialist workers have been opposing. They have been opposing the universal campaigns. So they have been the most kind of persistent agents of those forces, those institutions that the campaigns have been about. So they have been supporting the racism of the media, mainstream media, Fleet Street, and we'll come to the Daily Mail of September 1993. We'll come to that in a minute again, because we have discussed this before, but we'll discuss that again in this edition. When Quddus Ali was attacked in September 1993, I was the one who minutes before they got attacked had warned them that they would be attacked. I had no idea that whoever attacked them was waiting to attack them. I was making a warning to Quddus Ali and his two friends who were on their way through the Nelson Street to cross the commercial road in the evening, minutes before the attack happened. And I said to them not to go there. And one of them said they had a knife with them. And I told them off for making that stupid boast about having a knife. I said, don't be stupid. Literally, I told them off. And I didn't know that literally minutes after I had given them that warning, they had been attacked. And Quddus Ali was the worst victim of the attack because the others ran away. So, as I said before, when I found out within the next 2 hours or so, I then spoke to someone who has died since now. His name is Shahabuddin Belal, who was a minicab driver at the time. And he was working from a minicab company situated in the basement opposite my address in New Road. So I spoke to Shahabuddin Belal, who I called Belal, and most people who knew him referred to him as Belal. He gave me a long description of the flat and the family, etc., details about Quddus Ali. I had not known anything about his immediate family. I had only known him as one of the children in the area that I saw from time to time, and I gave the benefit of my knowledge, my advice, and my guidance, but I didn't know him by his family. But Belal knew his family because Belal had a relation living near the flat of Quddus Ali and his family. So he told me about where Quddus Ali came from and the rest of it. So after getting that essential information from Belal, And Bilal and I went to the family and got hold of the necessary information about their reaction and response, and then, of course, got a couple of pictures of Quddus Ali, which I then gave to the BBC or whoever I was in contact with at the time in the evening. And after that, I spent the whole night on the fax, on the phone, because in September 1993, there was no internet, not available to me anyway, not known to me for another 6, 7, 8 years or whatever. So fax, and I typed on my portable typewriter on my knees in New Road, and I phoned. I was forever on the phone to the BBC News people. And they created, my work created the necessary conviction on the part of the news editors and managers in the BBC, who then started broadcasting about Quddus Ali being attacked from the 6 o'clock bulletin on the BBC Radio 4. And from then it escalated into the BBC's entire network. When it did, the socialist workers were alarmed, and they immediately conspired and scrambled an alternative, which they couldn't do until in the afternoon, and they couldn't effect until the following day, I think. So they held a diversionary vigil outside the Royal London Hospital, where they encouraged a confrontation, physical confrontation, to take place among the so-called youths and the police. And that is where the Daily Mail became absolutely true to form. Instead of continuing the coverage of an innocent Asian teenager being nearly killed by a gang of racists, the story in the Daily Mail became the story about the police being victims of Asian youths. Imagine the effectiveness of the role of the socialist workers and their colluders in Tower Hamlets. They literally hijacked a very ethical and moral and peaceful and constitutional campaign strategy and narrative, away from being evidence-based and fact-based against racism, deadly racist attack, into the arena of the Asian militant youths, nearly killing law-abiding police officers. So that's the record. That's not something that can be denied. It's the record that can be checked by checking the contents of the Daily Mail. And the Sun and the others.